Well, it's been a crazy couple of weeks with trucker convoys and anti-vax mandate protests and the ousting of federal conservative leader Aaron O'Toole. Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Geoffrey Hale, Professor Emeritus in Political Science with the University of Lethbridge. Welcome back to Bridge City News again, Dr. Hale. So great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Hale, the final vote tally from the Conservative caucus was 73 to 45 to oust Aaron O'Toole as party leader. So, did that margin surprise you at all?
Really, the vote depended on which way the large center group of caucus went. Mr. O'Toole has had his critics for some time, both before and particularly since the last federal election. He has a group of loyalists, whether on pragmatic or ideological grounds, and there is a group in the middle that wasn't anxious to make a change, but felt that Mr. O'Toole had basically outstayed his effectiveness.
Did that margin surprise you, though? Like how many people wanted him out compared to those who were staying loyal to him?
The reports that were going the rounds suggested at least 60 people were willing to vote to replace him. One never puts too much stock to these numbers because there's always a certain amount of spin to them. But I think this was an indication that the center group in the caucus had had enough and felt a change was needed. And that's not inconsistent with some reports that were going around.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a lot of talk that this was just disgruntled social conservatives that were against O'Toole. But with those numbers, it must be more widespread than that, obviously, as you sort of alluded to there. What were the reasons that MPs voted him out?
Well, I think a number of the people who supported O'Toole as their first choice for the leadership, not as the consensus alternative, were the ones who made the difference in this vote. And I think part of it was a reflection of his weaknesses in his communication skills, the fact that he was not very good at staying on message. He couldn't craft a measured position and stick with it. He kept gyrating back and forth across the spectrum. There were problems in communicating with caucus members. Being an opposition leader is a difficult job. It gets more difficult when you take your supporters for granted. And there were some suggestions that Mr. O'Toole was doing just that. You add those things together, and basically it's act now or wait out the next election. And I don't think there was a great deal of confidence that Mr. O'Toole had learned enough from the last election to be as competitive as the caucus wanted in the next one.
So do you think after the O'Toole reign, caucus will want to shift more to the right of center, or is there still an appetite for that centrist approach?
Well, ultimately, caucus will not make the decision. It will depend on who gets out and mobilizes large numbers of conservatives, fellow travelers, interest group members, and whoever else wants to plunk down $10 or $15 to buy a conservative membership. That is the way the game is played these days. And so there are about 100 seats where there is no functioning conservative party, and those are vulnerable to takeovers from very special interest groups. Mr. O'Toole played the gun lobby very effectively the last time, and he made the mistake of dropping them in the middle of the election campaign. And my experience of those folks is that they have long memories and aren't terribly forgiving of being double-crossed. The dairy farmers obviously have played a significant role in Quebec, and we'll see which of the possible candidates line up with them or against them, or if anybody wants to take on that lobby, given the relative weakness of the Conservative Party in Quebec. And the last two leadership elections I've looked at, members are effective in recruiting voters or recruiting members for the Conservative Party if particular leadership candidates resonate in their areas. If they're out of tune with their constituents, they can't deliver the goods quite typically.
Interesting point there. So now, of course, it appears as though Pierre Poilievre is the early favorite to replace O'Toole. Who else do you think that we can expect will likely enter this race?
I think we will see at least one other center left candidate from Ontario or Quebec. I'm not sure if it'll be Michael Chong or Jean Charest or some other candidate who is trying to stake out a position. The number of people who can be competitive in a national race are relatively small, but Mr. Chong has shown himself to be a credible individual who, while he may not agree with many members of the party, treats them with civility and thoughtfulness, and that's always an advantage as in a leadership candidate in a divided party. Mr. Charest carries a little more baggage. He's been around since the Mulroney years. That would, I think, tend to weigh against him. But the Montreal and Toronto establishments need somebody to run. So it will be interesting to see who they can persuade to carry their banner. I don't know if Michelle Rempel Garner is interested in running this time, or if she will bide her time until until another future race. Leslyn Lewis's name has been kicked around. I'm not sure whether she is up for another run or if she wants to establish herself as a House of Commons player and not just the spokesperson for part of the social conservative wing of the party. These are some of the names that are being kicked around, but we'll have to see because the leadership organizing committee has not come out with the rules for the race. It has not come out with any ideas as to how much money they are going to extract from prospective candidates. Last time they asked for $300,000 as a deposit, and that chased off an awful lot of people. You don't want the bar so low that everybody and his dog can run. You don't want the bar so high that you discourage people with potential, but who have to get themselves out in front of the membership before they can raise significant sums of money.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. Now, any thoughts on who the new Conservative leader will be actually running against in the next federal election? Will it be Justin Trudeau again, or could it be someone like Chrystia Freeland? Because that may be an important factor as to who Conservatives should be voting for.
These are interesting questions, and obviously it's not in the government's interest to give anybody an answer this far away from a prospective election. We assume the government has at least another 18 months in its mandate. We will see whether Chrystia Freeland is able to come up with two budgets that would address some of the very real challenges the country is facing as a result of not just the pandemic, but the changing economic environment broadly. Mr. Trudeau, it's Mr. Trudeau's job as long as he wants it. He doesn't strike me as being in a Jean Chrétien type of position of having lost control of the party organization. But it's never a good idea to be seen holding the knife when there is an involuntary transfer power.
Okay. Now, some are hoping for a shorter leadership election, while others suggest it would be better to maybe stretch it out a bit longer. I would guess that a shorter time would maybe favor sitting MPs as opposed to outsiders. Any thoughts on the pros and cons on the length of the campaign?
Very much so. Realistically, in a minority government situation, you need to give the next leader time to establish a team, recruit new candidates, get the party's fundraising operation back into shape. So September seems like a reasonable time. June is will overlap with an Ontario provincial election in which Doug Ford will be running for his life. So a lot of organizers in Ontario will want the party to stay out of that window. October is a Quebec election, not as critical for the party, but certainly a courtesy. You don't want to be trying to communicate with conservative voters in Quebec if you have an election campaign running. So I would think something in the first half of September might be a possibility. Yes, that does give sitting MPs um, an advantage over outsiders. There are a handful of people who might have access to leadership teams that they can that they can energize within that time frame. But given the fact that there's a 21-day cutoff on memberships, that is taking us to the end of August, and I think the leadership organizing committee recognized from 2019 that letting things stretch out indefinitely was not a great idea. So um, I think we will see it. I think we will see it in September.
Okay. And of course, whoever ends up in that position, they'll be faced with a difficult task, of course, to heal the rifts and bring about some sense of unity. So what does that new leader need to do that?
Well, the I think first of all you have to be civil to all parts of the party and treat people with respect. If you don't treat people with respect while you're seeking their support, there's a very small chance that you will be able to carry that support into an election. And that applies wherever you fit on the spectrum. Uh, Secondly, you have to avoid giving hostages to fortune. Justin Trudeau will take advantage of any message indiscipline of candidates during this leadership race. So you cannot be caught saying things that are so far out of touch with what you want to say in an election campaign that you, in effect, destroy your credibility, either by pivoting as fast as Erin O'Toole did, by being caught in a crossfire because of the tactics you used to win the leadership. So these are basics, and they're a test of the political skills of those who will be running for office.
Now, Dr. Hale, you kind of suggested that we won't see that election for at least another 6 months or so. But hypothetically speaking, how do you think the new leader should address this whole anti-vax mandate protest and freedom rally? This could potentially be stumbling blocks or great opportunities to bring about change.
This is a tremendous challenge for the leader because you do not want to leave too much room for Maxime Bernier, whose party took it perhaps 10 seats away from the Conservatives by splitting the vote during the last federal election. By the same token, the way you deal with very disruptive protests will be the way that you invite your political opponents to disrupt you should you ever run for public office. It's known as what goes around comes around. And we have seen a fair bit of hypocrisy this time from those people who were heavily critical of First Nations protesters, basically giving a green light to any level of disruption from trucker convoy protests. People have a right to state their views. They do not have the right to disrupt other people's lives indefinitely. That used to be a conservative position. And it's something that if the leaders are seen to be encouraging lawlessness, not only will Mr. Trudeau or Ms. Freeland try to hang it on them in the next election, but they will invite other groups from the other end of the political spectrum to do exactly the same thing to them should they ever win an election. And so there has to be a way of balancing the right of people to have their say in a civil, if enthusiastic manner, without putting people's job security or occupational, capacity to do their jobs at risk. And some of the protest groups have done a better job at that than others.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that there, Dr. Hale. And thanks so much also for being with us today. We are out of time, but we always appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
Dr. Geoffrey Hale is Professor Emeritus with the University of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.